So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Kushina. So let's start the series. Naruto was not at all enjoying his day. That was the century's greatest understatement. A few things happened in the last moments of the fight between him, Tobi, Madara, and the Jubi that made the blonde angry. First, Naruto had failed to save his buddies after he saw Tobi order the Jubi to harm them. He had to try to save them on his own as he had no idea where the masters or any of his friends were. Obviously, he didn't succeed. The young man was burdened with the lives of the main body of the Shinobi Alliance. He now battled to protect the people of the several countries. Second, 9 beasts forced him to employ a spirit art he had only seen once because he couldn't defeat all 3 of them. Even if the fox detested Naruto's father, the Shiki Fujin was useful. Naruto called forth the Shinigami and ran through seals that flashed in his thoughts. The order he gave it? To stop the Jubi from doing any more damage, seal him inside himself, and remove his soul. While the 2 Uchiha watched the scene, helpless to stop the death god, the Shinigami obeyed and took the beast's soul and strength. Third, it was unexpected. Using the blonde to seal off the Jubi has some repercussions. It was impossible to use such a method on a creature as strong as that demon and still have it work flawlessly. Thus, space-time was being torn apart as Naruto felt his soul depart from his body and unite with the Jubi en route to Shinigami's stomach. If Kami ever learned of this, the Shinigami was screwed. The death god vowed that he would never do something as foolish as promise a child to seal an all-powerful core energy beast before the world was covered in white from the tear. The planet was destroyed in this way. Naruto had no idea at the time that he had been offered a second shot at life by someone up there. He had a tingling feeling as the numbness brought on by separating his soul from his body subsided. He felt as though every part of his body was on fire, and there was nothing he could do to ease the agony. As the boy was thrown around in the space-time vortex, the world turned from white to black. Naruto, father, step away from the Jinchuriki, or these children will die, said a voice. The wielder of the voice had a white mask covering his face and was dressed entirely in black. To the Yandame's surprise, he was Naruto father's tallest person and was holding Naruto father's newborn offspring in his hands, along with a Sharingan in his right eye. The young man who served as the headmaster, Naruto father, had 2 bangs that ran to his cheeks and light blonde hair that was spiked up over the majority of his head. Although he was dressed simply in black jeans and an undershirt, he had no intention of fighting. Merely seeing his 2 children born. 2 children, a girl and a boy, were in the man's hands. The girl's hair was tomato, habanero, red, while the boy's was spiky blonde. They both had sky blue eyes. 6 whisker marks were also visible on the girl, 3 on each cheek. The parents gaped as the masked man attached 2 explosive tags to the kids. As he tossed them both into the air, he questioned, amused by the scenario. Who will you save? The air was then filled with a TSSSK. To the children, Naruto's father leaped away from his wife. He witnessed the man seize his partner and vanish in a whirlwind, but his concerns were more pressing. The 3S flew to a residence with the Harem, and he tore off the blankets that were covering them. The tags detonated with a tremendous flash of red and yellow. He had just managed to grab his children and drag them to safety. He disregarded the discomfort, even though the home behind them had splinters, one of which was in his leg. Holding the 2 infants, he hiroshined to his room. Sorry, Naruto-kun, Natsumi-chan, your 2-san will be right back, he said, flashing another Harem to Naruto's mother. He could swear he saw a nod from the youngster as he reached for his white cloak with Yandame emblazoned on the back. Pained and trying to see her boyfriend, the redhead was bound with black seals and stretched across a big rock. What happened, Mom-chan? He took 9 demon. She gasped as she opened one eye to face him. Naruto's father chopped her down and placed her on the rock. Naruto and Natsumi, are they okay? He flashed Naruto to the room, sandwiched her between the children, and then flashed to his location above the headmaster statue, saying, "Hi, I'll take you to them." The hamlet was appalled by the devastation Nine Monster was making, as he destroyed buildings with his tails and slaughtered shinobi, medics, and residents alike. They knew their deaths were imminent when they saw a massive black ball appear in front of the beast. In front of Hyde Ninja Village, a person suddenly materialized on the headmaster monument and said, "Look, it's the Yondaime." Civilians started cheering when someone yelled. The fox fired the Bijudama straight at the academy, but Naruto's father leaped ahead, causing a massive black circle of symbols to erupt from a three-pronged weapon in his hands. A brief flash of light caused the black ball and Naruto's father to disappear, reappearing in a forest clearing, while the ball shot off behind him and exploded in a sphere of blue destruction, destroying the trees. "Where is the man in the mask?" inquired Naruto's father. He whispered to himself, "I must report what happened to the Sandaime," failing to notice the cloaked figure approaching from behind. Knowing that something was wrong, Naruto's father whirled around, brandishing a weapon, but it failed miserably to penetrate the man's head, and with a loud clap, the man grabbed his arm. A vortex threatened to take Naruto's father in as it rushed out of Madara. The Hiroshind quickly left the other man with only one thought. He's fast. He forced himself to stand up as his enemy stood in front of him, and Naruto's father skidded away from where he landed, which was in the debris of the shack that had exploded from the tags earlier. "You! Why are you doing this, and who are you?" "You could say I'm doing this on a whim and a goal, for both destruction and peace," the man said with a deep laugh. "Regarding my identity, I am of no significance." "I will stop you," Naruto's father said, hurling a three-pronged weapon at the enigmatic man. To his surprise, it went right through, but the master then materialized behind him and punched him in the chest, leaving the blonde on the other side. "A space-time technique? He's just as good with them as I am, and he has a Sharingan too. The only person with those abilities is your Madara Uchiha." The headmaster charged at him one more and punched his arm, which went through again, and the masked man solidified his hand to strike him back. "If you want me to be..." Even though the blow only lightly touched Naruto's father's chest, he understood that he needed to stiffen his body before attacking, so I need to go as quickly as I can. I'm hoping to do this in time, Hyde Ninja Village. The man smirked as he saw the ball of blue core energy in front of him. Naruto's father threw a three-pronged weapon in his right hand, creating a wind ball power. Time seemed to slow down as he faced the master, and Madara turned around and tried to strike him in the side. Power from wind balls! As dust covered the newly formed crater, Naruto's father hopped back. The headmaster declared from above. Toby gasped and widened, unable to become intangible in time. The wind ball power smashed into his shoulder, driving him into the ground. Toby knew he shouldn't have let his guard down, since the man had once been his sensei, and he looked passively at the blonde with spiky hair in front of him as the master skipped away. The intruder then felt a sharp ache in his chest, and as he looked down, he saw that Naruto's father's palm had black marks on it. The man mumbled, "Summoning contract seal." Naruto's father leaped back, landing 10 meters away from Toby, and said, "With this, the Nine Demon is no longer yours. Yondaime, I must give you credit for hurting me and terminating my agreement with the Nine Demon." He smirked as his body twisted into a singularity where his eye was, saying, "I intend to control the world, and there are plenty of ways for me to do that. Naruto's mother is too weak for me to reseal Nine Demon, so I'll have to pick one of the kids and seal the other half with me." To get ready for the sealing, he Hiroshined away. It was quite the ordeal. Hiruzen Sarutobi was successfully delaying the massive core energy beast. He knew that it had to be sealed, so he tried his best to buy time for the poor Naruto father and his children. No, he could never do that to the successor. Hiruzen knew that 2 children could never live effective lives as Jinchuriki, given that it was nearly impossible to seal the 9 demon and stay alive. Knowing that he would have to give his life to save his comrade and enclose the beast inside the Shinigami, he resolutely battled the 9 demon even more. He dashed to the spot where he saw the fox bound with golden chains. "Father, Enardio! Quit!" he screamed as he saw the man begin to go through hand signs. He punched his younger counterpart in the stomach before he could finish the sequence to summon Shinigami. "I can't let you die with 2 children to care for." He formed the hand signs: snake, boar, ram, rabbit, dog, rat, bird, horse, snake. With a loud clap, he exclaimed, "Shiki Fujin!" The Shinigami, a giant spectral figure with a sword in its mouth and red beads in its right hand, appeared behind the elderly former master. "Seal the 9 demon in me," Hiruzen ordered, as he watched the death god leap for the fox. Blue core energy flew out of the Bijou and into the Sandaime, but he was unable to completely seal away the core energy. A baby girl with red hair and whisker marks was weeping on a pedestal that Naruto's father swiftly summoned after noticing his predecessor's troubles. "I will not be sealed!" the demon snarled. The beast attacked the girl with a claw. Blood was all over the place, and there was a great scream of agony. Naruto's father was horrified, but he didn't move quickly enough. The parents sighed in relief as the claw touched the girl's forehead, and Hiruzen was out front, saving the Uzumaki and preventing them from sacrificing their own bodies. The father of Naruto came out front and said, "I apologize, Hiruzen-sama. You don't have to make this sacrifice." "Stop up, I created my decision." He pushed the claw back with a grunt. "The 9 demon will now be sealed by me. I'm grateful, Hiruzen-sama. Can I pay you back in any way?" Hiruzen groaned in agony. "Tell Asuma thought he was more deserving than I was. When he returns home, inform him. In order to look for his sibling, and to make me proud." The old master's sealing in the Shinigami was almost upon us. Naruto's father slammed his fists on the floor and nodded in response to his requests. "Hack no fuing Shiki!" The 9 demon condensed into a massive ball of crimson core energy, and snarled in fury. Natsumi, the 3rd Jinchuriki of 9 Beast the 9 monster, was infused with that core essence. As his soul was drawn out into Shinigami's mouth, Hiruzen sagged. Mom collapsed due to pain and exhaustion in her core. For the sake of his community, his daughter, and his almost dead partner, the Naruto father was unable to feel anything but sadness. Leave it to foolish humans to make Naruto's birthday the worst day ever for the 17th time. He knew that 9 Beast had attacked, and he could sense the core energy of all the other Bijou, but he had no idea what had happened to his parents. He assumed they were dead once more, but he was unable to see at all, much less know what was going on outside of Hyde Ninja Village. Although being a Jubi may have its advantages, he was certain that he would have a sister this time, and she was the Jinchuriki, not him. He was mistaken, though, for either the Naruto mother nor father passed away that day. This was nearly as bad as paperwork, and that's saying a lot. Paperwork was the bane of all masters, but it was nothing compared to the arguments in his family. It was cruel, relentless, merciless, and worst of all, made his paperwork take longer. At least he considered using shadow clones. Naruto father's master Bunshin fought the urge to stab itself in the leg and dispel. Naruto, 4-year-old Natsumi, whose mother approved of the hue, was shouted. She had straight red hair that reached her shoulders and was dressed in red slacks and a black top with an ANBU theme. "What did I do?" Naruto looked exactly like a mini Naruto father, just as Natsumi looked like her mother. Ever since Naruto's father married Naruto's mother, their friends had made comments about how similar their kids looked. If Naruto was his, He was pleased that his son didn't adopt his fashion sense, which included black shorts and navy blue t-shirts with white bandages above both knees. The yondaime found this strange because his son never trained like Natsumi and never really seemed to do much. "You are aware of what you did." As the kids quarreled, Naruto's father's Bunshin tried to calm them down by resting his head on the couch's armrest. No I don't." "What happened to Nine Beast? Unfortunately, you can't seal a bijou in a bijou, so who knew what was possible anyway, since no one had a giant core energy monster on hand to seal things into." However, Naruto persuaded her to name her plush fox Nine Beast, just for nostalgia's sake. He found it hilarious to play with the inferior bijou, and he was itching to greet the annoying fox once more. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "It's probably in your room." She hurried to Naruto's room. While Naruto's father examined him with the look he gave the children when he knew they had done something bad, the youngster shrugged and lay back down on the floor. He could think he heard Naruto murmur, "Just wait, Natsumi-ne." At that moment, he heard a pink girl cry from Naruto's room and raced back into the living room. He rubbed his eyes and saw it was Natsumi, completely coated in pink paint, and he started laughing on the floor, which was now faintly pink. "I'm going to strangle you, Naru-chan." Definitely inherited Naruto Mom's temper. She jumped on the blonde boy as pink dripped off her body onto the floor. Much to Naruto father's dread, Naruto Mom is going to kill him when she gets home. Pushing his chest into the ground with force a 4-year-old shouldn't have, she began shouting at him. "Where is he? Naruto? Now tell me!" His sister used him as a human punching bag, but at least he didn't act like a stuck-up brat like Nine Demon before the battle with Toby. To be honest, he was ashamed of a good number of his fellow bijou, ashamed enough to hide his insane amount of demonic core energy from them and stay hidden from their eyes. Despite the pain, Naruto couldn't stop laughing. Everyone knew he could take a hit, even as young as he was, so they were okay with him. Anyway, let's get back to the boy getting smashed to the ground. "I apologize, Natsumi-chan. I didn't do anything." The clone of Naruto's father began to perspire. "Isn't that what he's actually asking for?" Naruto paled. "If you don't give me him," she murmured in his ear, "I'll tell Ka-san when she gets home from her mission." Naruto Mom could be extremely convincing, especially if they damaged the headmaster mansion in any way, like by painting it pink. "I'm sorry, Nei-chan, I didn't mean it," he stammered. "He's beneath the loose floorboard in your room." "I knew you had it. Thank you, though, you're a good Nai-san." It was their children's 4th birthday today, and Naruto's mother had promised to return home in a few hours from her mission to hunt down a suspicious Inuzuka who had left the village on business. Naturally, this meant Ibiki would miss their birthday dinner, but the celebrations continued long enough that it wouldn't matter too much. In fact, the real Naruto father would be returning and picking up the kids in a few minutes. Oh, sweet Kami, Natsumi was still pink. Just before they parted ways, Naruto father's Bunshin intervened, saying, "Natsumi, you must put on some proper attire in order to attend the celebration." Naruto: "I have no idea. Why must every Uzumaki child play a practical joke?" To the ceiling, he said. "Yes, Tusan." Before his father could protest, Naruto dashed across 2 rooms and out the door. "I'm going for a walk outside." The Jubi grinned at how much fun it was to play tricks on his sister and, in a more vulgar sense, his brother. He didn't particularly enjoy October 10th because of the memories he had of being beaten and almost killed. People thought he was a demon, and now he didn't understand why being super powerful was bad. He didn't destroy much of the village, though he could. He had complete control over his demonic core energy, but he would never do it. He loved Hyde Ninja Village too much for it. The Rinnegan was fun to trip people with Shinra Tensei, but the Sharingan did well to scare the shit out of people with Gen Spirit art. Naruto walked past the Yamaka flower shop, wondering when he'd have to go back home. He liked to wander around the village and just sense people's core energy, which was an awkward pastime for anyone and impossible for most. But Naruto claimed to have two legendary desperate art and immeasurable amazingness. Naruto, someone shouted. Ino, as expected, a young girl with long blonde hair, blue eyes, and some sort of purple fetish, not that Naruto really understood what that term meant at such a young age, came out of the tiny store. Naruto, today, I've been searching everywhere for Natsumi. Where did she go? My Two-san promised to attend the festival, but she hasn't? Come on, relax. We'll arrive shortly. Oh, that's good. Well, Naruto-kun, happy birthday! Like your sister, I believe you are a hero, even if others don't. Thank you, Ino. The notorious Naruto buddy fangirl Ino couldn't have harbored feelings for him from the age of 4, could she? He was far more strong than Naruto's friend, but he needed to quit acting like a haughty rival. He couldn't help it. It was just one of the traits that the Jubi seemed to have combined into him. Ino-chan, I'll see you tonight. How did the chan get there? Everyone is coming to our party, he said, covering his mouth with his hands right away. Hinata too, yet she's never let to do anything. She paused and said, Oh, I wonder who else will be there. Naruto, Two-san is making me learn Thai spirit art stances, she said as she ran back inside the flower store, leaving Naruto staring at her. Shikamaru is right, she is a nuisance. That night. Blow out the candles, Natsumi and Naruto, all of the other children, including the majority of the Rookie 9, were there at their birthday celebration. The council and Naruto's father said that she was holding back a great evil. PSSSH, 9 Beast was about as evil as Naruto's pinky toe and twice as fluffy. If he really wanted to, Naruto could crush all of the humans, right? He was still the big bad Jubi and not some idealistic kid, right? Wrong. Everyone was cheering for them, well, mostly for Natsumi. Kids, congratulations! Out of the room's shadows appeared an elderly man with spiky white hair, loud wooden sandals, and strange clothing. Thanks, Aroaji, Naruto said. Don't refer to me as that Gaki. But according to Two-san, the name seemed appropriate. Everyone in the room laughed, with the exception of Jiraiya, who was a big pervert, and the children, who didn't know what a pervert was. The sensei of the headmaster said, Naruto, father, you understand why I'm here. With all seriousness. It has to do with your daughter's birthday gift. Jiraiya sensei and Naruto mom-chan are going to start teaching Natsumi how to control the 9 demons' core energy, said the Naruto father, who was seated between his 2 children and nodded. A few heads nodded in agreement. That's her birthday present, because we think it will give her much more control in the future if we start early. Sure, it would be risky, but training would be easy with a former Jinchuriki and one of the greatest Fuin spirit art masters alive. That's true, Naruto father, said Naruto mom with a smile. However, aren't you overlooking the gift of another person? I'm not, of course. Naruto, here you go. He pulled a present out of his storage scroll in his arm. The wrapping paper was white with leaves on it, how fitting. The boy grabbed it and tore off the wrapping paper. It was an Orin book, and everyone looked at Naruto father in horror. It's not what you think. I want him to eventually study my Harem, thus it's a book on Fuin spirit art. The group exhaled collectively, and Naruto shrugged. According to his recollections, he had never really dabbled in Fuin spirit art, so it was a good beginning. Learning the Harem was almost foolish because he already had a lot of power, but whatever, it's a goal, and a goal is exactly what the young Jubi needed. Many thanks, Two-san. After taking Natsumi past the other children, Hinata, Kiba, Chuji, Shikamaru, Ino, Shino, and the 2S, his son said, We're going to go play outside now. Normally, on a day like this, it would be about sunset, but as the year went on, the days were getting shorter and the nights longer. It was probably 7 p.m., and quite dark. All right, so what do you guys want to do? That's what happens when you are mentally older than dirt. Naruto asked, taking the initiative as usual. Watch clouds. People observe. Eat something? Dogs as pets. I hope it makes sense. Why? Since it makes sense. Whatever everyone else wants, I guess. Prank folks. Technically, the two had only ever met when their fathers spoke, but they weren't that dissimilar. Perhaps his former rival would have said, "Think about how much my life sucks and plot to kill my brother." Naruto's perspiration dropped at the range of responses, wondering what his friend would have said if he had been present. Well, it appears that we are playing ninja, Tebeo. After several months. On Hinata's 5th birthday, Naruto did not train outside of that since he didn't care. He could just release his core energy and alter his form nonetheless. He had learned all the key elements of basic Fuin spirit art by heart and achieved a 3 out of 10 in his small mastery of it. When he heard a twig snap, he was enjoying a pleasant stroll around the training grounds. The 4-year-old sprang into action, searching for an intruder and detecting an indistinct shape in the trees. Well, it appears that I am no longer able to hide. The man was taller than most, standing about 6 feet, with smooth black hair, brown eyes, and 2 twin swords on the back of his jet black A&B gear. His most distinguishing features were a kuno hitate around his forehead and a young, laver-haired girl slung over his back. Sorry, brat, this isn't your lucky day. Are you not the brat? For being his son, you've earned a pretty good price in IWA. The man thought. Give back the girl, was his icy response. Make me runt. You have one last chance, Naruto said, his eyes rippling with a pupil condensing in the middle and dark concentric rings lining his blue irises until the entire eye was a Rinnegan. I won't question you if you swear not to hurt her and go back to the community in peace. As if. Humph. What are you, 5? For you, I believe I'll bring the girl home, harvest her eyes, and turn her into my own slave. How do you feel about that? Wrong decision. He held out his hand and said, Bansho Tenin. The girl jumped from his grasp to the young blonde, who gently placed her on the ground, and he continued to care for her even after she had gone to considerable measures to save him during Nagato's invasion. The startled Jonin was stabbed in the chest by a black rod of core energy that appeared out of nowhere. Never ever meddle with my friends, through the black receiver, he sent core energy into the man, causing him to writhe in agony. His voice was deeper, demonic, and demanding. It was torment because the foreign core energy battled his body from the inside out. Shinra Tensei, Naruto muttered, shooting the man back into a tree, denting it. That isn't feasible. You're not powerful enough. The man staggered away from the stump and gazed at the 5-year-old before him as the split tree fell back into the forest with a loud crash, kicking up dirt. Threatening her will cost you. He wiped his bleeding mouth on his sleeve while Naruto observed. Come any closer and she dies. The man smirked as he drew a sword and approached Hinata, pressing the weapon's blade against her neck. Bastards! Everyone like him will pay. Nagato, Kabuto, Orochimaru. I'll kill them! Naruto's rage only grew. He pointed to the hole in his chest where the black core energy receiver was embedded and said, I'll just take the girl with me to the grave since it seems like I won't get back alive. As he raised the weapon and stabbed her in the stomach, they watched in terror. He was unable to save her. Even with all of his strength, he was powerless because they were too far away. Rewind. 6 black rods were inserted into Naruto's back, 1 through his hands, and he was pinned on the ground. He looked up to see a Hyuga with lavender hair running at him. She was stopped by a man in a black coat with red clouds holding up his hand. Nagato's puppet Pain used the Rinnegan's gravitational pull to pick her up. The man threw her to the ground and lowered his hand to the ground. Naruto realized she was nearly dead, yet a cloud of dust was kicked up. Hinata! She's unable to save herself. Why? She was immobile. She saw a shadow approach. A black rod came out of his sleeve and descended. Final flashback. Pain had recurred. Naruto lost control as red splashed all over the place. Naruto awoke to a frigid, silent earth devoid of trees for miles. He could only see Hyde Ninja Hamlet in the distance, and a crater the size of a small hamlet surrounding him. He initially pondered what the devil had happened, but then he realized that his rage had overcome him. Fury? Why should he be upset about anything? The all-powerful being he believed himself to be wouldn't care. One of his more human feelings, a nagging feeling, was in the back of his mind. Concerned? Worried? He sat up and tried to explain what the hell he had just done, unable to identify it precisely. The item that started the series of emotions in his mind was recalling the reason for his anger, Hinata's passing. He had a family, friends, and many other important people to worry about, and he was also Naruto. He grinned. Yeah, regardless of how he felt about most people in general, he would still keep them safe. The other emotions he didn't particularly enjoy followed that joy of remembrance. He wondered if he had murdered any innocent individuals, and he felt terrible. He hoped the hamlet was safe, which his view of the horizon confirmed was also true, and that the Kumo shinobi was dead, which he was certain the man was. He distinctly recalled fighting the man, witnessing him murder Hinata, and then Hayashi flying over to retrieve his daughter while Naruto battled the more experienced shinobi. He threw the foreign ninja out of the training area like a toy, using his adult body and core energy to transform into an elder version. Sadly, the individual had already passed away before he reached his current location. He was upset that he had given the man a slow and agonizing death, and he let out a tremendous outpouring of inner energy over the passing of his former admirer. So, more than an hour later, he wound up there, in the center of the crater. Man, I should create core energy limiters or something to avoid doing this again, he moaned. Being all-powerful these days is difficult, and I don't really need the strength unless I'm fighting Madara or someone similar. With the majority of his concerns resolved, he returned to the community. If Hinata was dead, he would simply bring her back to life, and if his father witnessed him devastating a significant portion of the forest, he would fabricate a pathetic justification. It's not as though a 5-year-old could possess that much raw power and inner energy. Correct? Observing that it was nearly impossible for him to be sore, he got up and reverted to his younger self. He then returned to Hyde Ninja Village to pretend to be innocent and clarify a few things. He would then wait. Hold off till he is able to play with some of the people who believe they are strong. Madara, Nagato, Tobi, and Danzo would all be in for a delightful surprise. To put it briefly, he was going to enjoy altering the future, beginning with Kiri in a few years. So far, Naruto's father's night has been exhausting. There was an effort to kidnap the Hyuga heiress, in addition to his excruciating concern for his son. I'm grateful to Kami that Hayashi arrived in time to save Hinata from whatever the heck was happening. The yondaime heard that the kidnapper was totally destroyed by a young man covered in dark black core energy. He took a moment to gather his thoughts. Was that a Kumo shinobi, I wonder? Did he send someone to clean up the entire plot because it went against his orders? Given that Kumo has 2 Jinchuriki who are known to possess some form of core energy cloak, that would make sense. Unfortunately, Hinata was knocked unconscious and Hayashi didn't receive a nice description. And Naruto, where is he? Naruto Mom-chan will be furious if she discovers that he is merely playing around or whatever. Oh Kami, please save us all. He prayed quietly. Please, Naruto, come up with a good reason. His job and his troublesome kids made him feel defeated. He sighed deeply, threw on his nightwear, and stumbled to his bed after finally removing his robes and headmaster hat. He draped an arm over a snoring Nerda mother and dozed out, feeling her warm body. He heard a creak at the door in the middle of the night. The sound woke his wife, and he leaped to his feet. In a whisper, she asked, "What was that?" "I don't know. The seals should still be working, right?" He couldn't see the guilty expression on his mother's face in the dark room. "You forgot to replace them, didn't you?" he asked, unable to see her nod, but his father was always aware of his wife's forgetfulness. "I'll be right back." With the elegance of, he slipped down the steps. "Okay, so." A master, utterly quiet. He moved to the living room, where he silently located the light switch because he was familiar with the place. He turned it on. "Ayaha! Tu-san!" Nerda's father barked in response to the yell. The blond youngster quickly chastised himself for letting a human frighten him so much. Well, he was partially justified because it was his home. "Oh, it's just you, Nerda. I hope you didn't wake up your sister with that." "Alright." Nerda made every effort to suppress his silly feelings. He wanted to embrace and protect his sister and parents after nearly losing himself that evening. He had previously vowed to defend his priceless people, and he would not be backing down now. "Where were you?" "Places. Your mother's going to be upset." "Yup." Nerda's father was amazed at how a 5-year-old could be so composed, especially after spending the night outside. Nerda's black A&BU style shirt was torn across the middle, and enough of it looked like it would come off if you touched it. "Why is your shirt ruined?" It was the poorest of his clothes, but a few squares of fabric dangled off of it. The word mostly was used to describe how well his pants held up. Evidently, Nerda pointed out, he should make an effort to maintain this physical size, and if necessary, he could just henge into the older version of himself. Apart from that, he could just purchase larger clothing. "Well, I guess you could say it is ruined." "This is going nowhere." The headmaster grimaced at his son's remark and moved to sit next to him on the couch. "How kind of you to point that out." For a few minutes, they simply sat there together without exchanging words. His father's mild resentment of the youngster vanished when Nerda suddenly embraced him. In any case, Nerda's father wasn't the type of man to hold his anger for very long. He eventually stood up and tousled his son's blonde, spiky hair. "You know, we still care for you even if we have to train you, sister," the young person said. "Yeah, I know. I'm not one for training anyway." "Good night. You have to explain everything in the morning. I sense that you've had a long night already," he said. "You could say that." As his father approached his room, Nerda decided to spend some time pondering and meditating downstairs. He didn't need to sleep because he was the Jubi, after all. He concluded that it's the simple things that matter. He had some things to work out. Who was he? He was Nerdu on the one hand. He had been the local outcast, despised and avoided by all. He was the academy's biggest fool, pulling practical jokes on everyone. Although he was unable to stop his adversary and best buddy, Nerdu friend Uchiha, from defecting, he was the man who repeatedly saved Hyde Ninja Village. He was among the final 2 Jinchuriki to confront Tobi. He was the Jubi, on the other hand. Other than regaining his core energy, which he was most definitely not going to achieve this time, he didn't give a damn. For as long as he could remember, the world's practical deity simply stood there like a tree. In addition, he was a little irritable, a little conceited, and prone to disregard morality. Now, who the devil was he? He simply stopped, trying to figure out what he wanted to be. He couldn't go back to being the previous Nerdu, but he also didn't want to be as indifferent as he had been. No, he couldn't do that to himself, except for little times spent with his family. He could still be cunning, a kind of trickster, nevertheless, and wreak havoc on anyone who had mistreated him. He could at least have a little fun now that he was free of the stupid notion of a second chance and complete tranquility. He would strive to be the old Naruto in the interim, but he wouldn't denigrate himself. Why is it so difficult to just be me? He grinned. This is really problematic. A young genius woke up in his room somewhere in the Nara compound and began to sneeze violently. He dismissed it as a result of his dream and returned to his slumber. Following the unidentified boy's lead, Naruto shut off the light and stumbled to his room next to Natsumi. After realizing how dull the world was for Nine Beast, I kind of miss him. He napped too, thinking, perhaps I'll figure out a way to get him out of Nasen safely. The boy with spiky hair gave his own explanation of everything he had done the previous evening the following day. In essence, it was a dumb story about how he thought it was really awesome to try a tree-walking workout that he seen a few jonin do and was knocked unconscious when he fell off the tree. The principles of core energy exhaustion and core energy regulation, as well as the dangers of doing so unsupervised, were presented to him by his parents. Yes, perhaps it was that way for other people, but if he took the suppression gates off, Naruto's core energy was practically limitless. Because he was a pure core energy being with a stronger soul and more core energy than the other Bijou, he also possessed perfect control over his core energy. His parents, meantime, were a little suspicious. The core energy that Naruto had liberated during his adventure was nearly dark when they requested him to display it to them. At first, Naruto's father was concerned that it might be connected to the person who was there when the child Hyuga was abducted, but he quickly disregarded the possibility. It reminded his mother a little bit of the core energy she had suppressed from the Nine Demon. Oh, why are you guys looking at me like that? Oh, I'm so sorry, Sochi, said Naruto's parents. I was just thinking. Me too, Beyond Aim said. In an attempt to get details about the Hyuga incident, Naruto questioned, why are you guys so on edge after last night? He went to his wife for comfort. Ma, his father said smilingly, we're having some problems with Kumo, that's all. This kind of stuff isn't something you need to worry yourself over, right, honey? She yelled back, her hair rising in a demonic spirit art that reminded the two of the Nine Demons' tales. You think I'm going to agree with you after you let our son endanger himself, she said. No hane. Sorry about not watching Naruto. And you? I don't have any idea what to say to you. You don't tell us where you were for the entire night and do dangerous core energy exercises? You're grounded until you graduate the academy. Her father gave her a comforting tap on the shoulder. Are you sure, Naruto Mom-chan? That's a little extreme. She slid into Naruto's father's arms as his countenance relaxed a little, ending in an intense embrace. She smiled suggestively at him and said, I'll reconsider, but it'll cost you. Her spouse said, I'll think of a way to repay you. Naruto raised a hand to his lips. Cough, sex cough. The parents were about to make out in front of their kids when Natsumi finally came downstairs and broke them up. Young children. She was promptly briefed on Naruto's adventures from the night before, and the whole family left to pursue their own interests. Natsumi was planning to train with a friend of Naruto. Normal, and Naruto was likely to track out any civilian retailers who had overcharged him in a previous existence and play tricks on them. How wonderful it is to share a work of Gen spirit art, huh? For the following year, the twins would follow the same schedule until they were all 6 years old and ready to enter the academy. Since space-time Ni spirit art and Fuin spirit art were the only things he was unfamiliar with, Naruto continued to be interested in them, but he had not yet questioned his father. In addition, he believed his father was too preoccupied with schooling his sister, who was in dire need of it. Not with Naruto around, however. Not quite at the one-tail level yet, Natsumi had already taken possession of the Nine Demons' initial core energy while Naruto played around. Her parents might think about having her graduate early because she could also use the Academy 3 in the form of spirit art. They didn't because they wanted their children to grow up to adulthood. Even if a large portion of it was caught in a moon, which was a complete pain in the ass, Naruto sighed because he had lived long enough. Adapting to human life was going really well for the Jubi. Even though he was frequently just a dull, emotionless jerk when no one was looking, he started to exhibit a few traits of his former personality in public every day. However, he found that occasionally interacting with people, particularly his buddies and Ino, was a relief. His best friend, dare he say he had one, was the Yamanaka, and they spoke virtually every day. They discussed a wide range of subjects, including the academy, flowers, and paradoxically, the future. In addition, the academy was preparing for the next generation of greats in just 1 year. Naruto might have sent a master Bunshin to school for him instead, even though he couldn't have cared less about the classes themselves. He could also simply create a core energy clone, but he wouldn't have the memories. In any case, he looked forward to the future with great anticipation and began to count down the years until he would reveal his existence to Kiri. It was the academy's first day. The twins hurried to class and sat down with their buddies after their father bid them farewell. Everyone in the class was the same as previously, with the exception of his sister, as Naruto recalled. He took a seat behind Ino, next Chuji, who was seated beside Shikamaru. Naruto was in the rear corner. Naruto made the fatal error of not sending a clone in his place because he believed that the first day might have been crucial. If anything, learning why they study math and how they will use the textbooks to study history was really dull. Hurry up! He was able to recite historical events that most people would not have ever considered in their fantasies. When can I go battle Yagura? Ugh! His head slammed into the table. Irika Yumino, their teacher, asked loudly, "Natsumi?" She screamed back, "Here!" from the seat next to her Naruto friend. "Naruto?" No response. "Naruto," the youngster said, looking up from his desk, annoyed that the small person had interrupted him. He gave himself a mental punch. "I'll do my best not to call them small. It might be better to describe it as little, vertically challenged, or unimportant." "NRDO!" Their instructor's head grew to the size of a desk and acquired numerous checkmarks. "Here," he said casually. Naruto grinned mischievously at Ino as she turned around and snickered. As he concluded reading the names of the class, Irika grumbled, "I can already tell he will be a handful." As usual, the mention of Uchiha Naruto friend made a lot of fangirls swoon. "Alright, can everyone introduce themselves? What they like, dislike, their hobbies, and their dreams?" Until he was given the opportunity to speak, Naruto ignored everything. "I'm Naruto. I like the number 10, my family, friends, and trees. I dislike the moon, things that don't interest me, and those that hurt my friends or family. I don't have any hobbies, and as for my dream, I'll figure it out." Irika gave the Yandame's son a smile. Interesting, Naruto. Moving on." It was a terrible day. They did not even practice sparring. Naruto had no idea what he would do if they engaged in any sparring. He couldn't lose to a group of unimportant people because he was the most powerful being on the planet, but he also didn't want to upset them to the point where he won Rookie of the Year or his mother became enraged, which would frighten him even more. Since all of the humans were such hypocrites, he preferred to operate in the background, promoting the idea of looking under the underneath, but failing to recognize that Naruto wasn't even human. Perhaps he was skilled at concealing his inner force, or perhaps it was because he was the son of the Yondaime, and no one dared. They did learn about the establishment of Hyde Ninja Village. While Uchiha Madara was rejected, Hashirama Senju received endless adoration and admiration. In order for everyone to comprehend Natsumi's situation, the lecture eventually changed to a discussion on Jinchuriki. Nida's eyes briefly flashed Tomo as he threatened to maim the woman when one pink-haired Sakura Haruno asked if that made her a demon. Although he had already come to admire Sakura, this woman was very different from the kunoichi he was familiar with. Niru spent too much time talking about trivial topics while dining with the other clan heirs, including his friend. Nearly on the same level as the two blondes at their table, Natsumi and Niru were pals. The Jubi wondered why he had joined up for this as Ino continued to talk to Niru about how excited she was to learn how to be a kunoichi. Niru persisted in attempting to project his former vivacious personality rather than acting as bored and uninterested as he actually felt. It was an improvement, even though he wasn't completely stupid. For much of the following 2 years, he would behave in a similar manner and was content to be with his family. It was worth it even though he didn't train, spent a lot of time relaxing, and didn't get much sleep. At last, he had a sister and parents. He had a wonderful bowl of ramen when he got home, and everything was good. He was among the best in his year at the academy. With the exception of fighting the Chunin, when he swallowed his pride and pretended to be beaten, he was declared invincible in Tai spirit art and never suffered any injuries. The best part for him was that, when studying Fuin spirit art or creating intriguing new spirit art with his numerous Da spirit art and limitless core energy, he would typically send a clone to the academy. Sadly, he could only utilize a small amount of Suiton, Doton, and Katon spirit art because he had only discovered scrolls on 3 elemental affinities. He was aware that the B rank and C rank spirit art might be incredibly devastating when fueled by his core energy. Nobody was aware of his true strength. With the exception of Ino, every girl was aware of Niru Friendkun's magnificent appearance. Niru didn't do homework or written tests since they were too tedious and bothersome. This wasn't his fault. Shikamaru concurred. He became closer to Ino in spite of the dullness of the shinobi schooling system. Every day after school, they spent 2 hours together until she had to go for her clan training. A/N, I'll do a date scene with Ino, but not right now. I'm sorry, but it's not time yet. They're 8 years old. Niru could genuinely predict that they would be a blonde couple in a few years. Every time his father made fun of them for being a perfectly colored couple, Mei would respond with a look of indifference tinged with a hint of, "Shut or I'll kill you." The unfortunate child was likewise teased by Aroaji, also called Jiraiya, but for a completely different cause. When Niru's mother witnessed him speak those things in front of her daughter, she lost it. "I'm the world's largest pervert" was written on the super pervert's back, and he was thrown naked into the women's hot springs. After that, he needed crutches and was given a free journey to a remote village where Tsunade, a blonde physician, was hiding. What Niru had done over the last 8 years came to a head on this day. He would wonder every day where and when he would get to slam a bad guy's ass into the ground for fun. It was just the day. Niru grinned broadly when a ray of sunlight came through his window. It was around 7 in the morning, shortly after sunrise. He swiftly divided his core energy and threw on his simple clothes, leaving 2 Narutos standing in his room. It was more simple and less shinobi-like than the fission method used by Night-aimed Suckermaster Mew. Naruto found it easy. He divided his 10 taels worth of core energy and added roughly 1 tael's worth to a clone. It was nearly impossible for any person. The clone hurried off to descend the stairs and head to the academy with his sister. The original person put a few items in a bag. He didn't have many necessities, but he had enough to make his journeys more enjoyable. He dressed in what appeared to be an excessively large ANBU costume. He then aged himself to the point where he appeared to be between 17 and 18 years old, and could fit comfortably in them. The 5'10" blonde appeared to be a deity of sorts due to his toned muscles and tight abs. He covered himself with a black cloak and put on 2 black gloves with metal plates on his hands, making himself look like a sinister killer. With a sigh, he decided that was not what he wanted, so he removed the hood off his head and disguised himself as a nondescript individual he had recently seen on the street. He had brown eyes, a slender build, and brown hair that reached his ears. He leaped out of his window into the warm morning with his new identity. Why did he feel so joyful? Simply put, a chunin on gate duty had told him the first stories of the bloodline murder and the Kiri revolt. The two were always the first to spread rumors about other countries and hidden towns, and they were annoyed by the lack of activities in Hyde Ninja Village. What was his destination? Why, of course, to Kiri. A woman wearing a dark blue dress and long, as in down her entire back, red hair beat her fingers against her desk with a hint of annoyance. The newly established opposition was disorganized, time-consuming, and worst of all, made Meitarumi feel elderly. The resistance was a recently formed effort to defend bloodlined individuals from Yagura, the Mizumaster. Mei could still recall the day, just 2 months ago, when there were only 20 people there. They had roughly 1,000 now. It was a start, but not even a tenth of Yagura's forces. To be honest, Mei was amazed by how quickly Ao, Zabuza, and the other members of her original team were able to enlist shinobi, both bloodlined and not. Remarkably, many people continued to serve the Bloody Mist and adhere to the standby Jinchuriki long after the Yuki clan was massacred. Why? Mei thought it was because, before taking the Mizumaster's hat 2 years ago, Yagura had been a kind and reliable person. Gazing back at the pile of papers in front of her, she let out a sigh. Who would have guessed that an underground criminal organization would have so much paperwork? When she consented to be the leader, it wasn't Mei. The amount of food they had to ship in every day to pay for this institution was beyond insane. When she heard a knock on the door, she briefly put down her pen. She said, "Come in," hoping it was a young, attractive man. Regretfully, Zabuza Momochi was the man who entered the room. She couldn't dispute that Zabuza was a decent man, somewhat nice, serene, and interesting. "What do you want, Zabuza?" she asked. Perhaps she detested those tiny eyebrows, which she concluded he lacked. For whatever reason, he was at least one of her most devoted followers. For what reason did he attempt to kill Yagura? To be honest, she didn't give a damn about his motivations or his previous massacres. In the bedroom, she was certain it wouldn't matter. "No, you're not meant for him. He's not even adorable." Mei was secretly hopeful, but she wasn't persuaded by the explanation. "To see you, of course, Mei-chan." "Fine. I just wanted to let you know I'm leaving." "What? Why?" Mei exclaimed, stunned. She gave the pale former resistance Nin a sidelong glance. Since they all continued to consider themselves to be authentic Kiri shinobi, his Kiri Hittite was unaffected. He had his short hair slightly spiked up and was wearing his awful camouflage, which Mei felt would make him seem good. Why would he abandon them? He was confident that they would amass enough backers to confront Yagura. "Do you know how much money we have left?" "Well, yeah. I'm constantly reminded by Ao and the damn paperwork." Zabuza smiled. "How long do you think the measly 3 million ryo would last?" Mei noticed they were nearing the end of their money as she glanced down at the documents. The subterranean residents of their bunker had not brought enough ryo to purchase food from the nearby communities for 2 months. If the uprising hadn't succeeded by then, perhaps in a year or 2 they might have their own greenhouse. "According to Ao, we have about 2 weeks. At her perplexed look, he clarified. "I've got an idea. I'll take some bounty missions and see if I can't keep everyone funded. I suggest you have a few others do this as well before we all go broke. That would be the most humiliating defeat ever, and I won't have a broke rebellion associated with me." Poor guy. It made perfect sense, though, and she understood what he was saying. She couldn't even dispute it. She wondered what had been left unsaid. "So that's the only reason you want to leave?" "I have another reason, but it isn't important," he responded. "There's this Yuki boy I found, starved half to death and treated like trash by his small village. I decided to train him to take care of himself, But I don't want to do that in a war zone. Did you just say you have a heart? He continued. Don't get too used to it. I'm going to pack up and leave with him this afternoon. I'll make sure to come back and see you, Mei-chan, before turning to leave. Wait! Zabuza-kun! He exclaimed, but the door was only partially open. At the additional honorific, Mei covered her mouth with her palm. When will you visit? The door slammed shut. Once a year. I promise. She was alone after that. Not exactly, actually. Her desk was always covered with a massive pile of documents. She was horrified to hear another knock on the door. Can't everybody leave me alone today? I got 3 stacks of paperwork first. Zabuza-kun must then depart from me. Her head slammed into the desk. Come in. When the door opened, Ao entered with a man in tow, looking magnificent in his blue, spiky hair. Ao wore simple A&BU clothing and had an eye patch over his right eye, which she recognized as the Byakugan. These days, he was performing a large portion of the surveillance missions. The man that followed her advisor was very regular, with ordinary brown eyes and brown hair that hung down below his ears. At 5 feet 10 inches, he was dressed in a typical navy blue shirt, sandals, and somewhat tattered black slacks. He looked to be in his early 20s overall. What the devil was he doing here? He was so thin that it was obvious he wasn't a shinobi. And who in the world was he? She was unable to identify a henge, and he didn't appear to be a Kiri citizen at all. What was happening? Ayo, who is this? The man raised his voice. Neither of them realized how much he was suppressing his core energy. This is Ryo, no last name. He claims he is a civilian, but my sensory skills tell me he has at least Jonin-level core energy reserves. He followed me peacefully here, saying he wouldn't explain who he actually was until he was in front of you. She glanced up and down at the unidentified man, but his attitude seemed non-threatening. So, who are you? My name is Ryo, like he said. I was an orphan. Was my name? By that, what does he mean? I'm not a civilian, I just look like one. That hardly answers Mei-sama's question, said Ao. Mei suppressed her rage, believing that Ao had only mentioned that her life was brief. It's not like she has all of her life to listen to your younger generation's attempt at mysteriousness. I'm old then. You bastard, I'm not old. Ryo said. Fair enough. But the other two recoiled at what they saw in his eyes. With 3 commas circling the center like a vortex, they were blood red. You're a Uchiha, Mei said. From Hyde Ninja Village! Cried Ao, a little furious. After the 3rd Shinobi War, the resistance leader was aware that Ao still disliked the Hyde Ninja Village shinobi. He was an old hag who found it difficult to let go of grudges. You could say that. Gazing into his crimson gaze, Mei asked, Why are you here? This chap wasn't her favorite. Not only did he appear to be dishonest, but he was also meddling in a matter unrelated to his village, claiming to be from Hyde Ninja Village. The individual lacked Hittite, a symbol of loyalty. Neither of the resistance shinobi understood what it meant. I guess I have a personal issue with Yagura and his tenant. They stole something from me, and I'd very much like it back. Besides, I can't let him slaughter your Kekkei Genkais away, now can I? You wish to help us? Mei inquired, nodding to Ao so he could open his eye and see if he would be honest. Yes, I do. He's not lying, Ao said, quickly replacing the eye patch. She stood up and approached him, whispered in his ear. Ao, show him a room. The lovely but deadly voice said. Make any more comments about my age, and I'll kill you. Also, keep a few people outside the door for a few days, and make sure he is truthful. Ao paled at the sound, then nodded like a small child. The man bowed and went with her advisor. Hi, Mei-sama. Follow me, Ria. Even in the morning, the day is already problematic. Two Naros sneezed somewhere in Hyde Ninja Village as she was thinking this. Naruto was astounded by how credulous these people were. What if he was a shinobi from Kiri? What if Yagura's army wasn't going to be completely destroyed? As the blue-haired Byakugan wielder guided him to a tiny room beneath the ground, he chuckled to himself. There were just 1,032 people, according to the location's core energy signatures, which would be insignificant if Yagura launched an attack with his forces. The fact that the idiot had a Byakugan, and they believed he just possessed Jonin-level core energy, nearly killed the Jubi. He unloaded and collapsed into the bed after being placed in his room to narrate the happenings of the last several days. Comfort, ah! What has been the highlight of the trip thus far? The presence of a pair of guards outside his room. Given that they most likely weren't seal masters or possessors of the Rinnegan, it's not like they could do anything to stop him. He would just change in a few years if they killed him while he was asleep. Even though it was far too unpleasant and far from ideal, it served a purpose. He was reminded of Tobi and Nagato by thoughts of the Rinnegan. One was an idealistic bastard who was despised by both of his incarnations. The blonde, now a brunette, might have a chance at the Uchiha within the week. But by his standards, Nagato was passable. He truly only wanted peace, even though he wouldn't allow the man get away with demolishing his house earlier. They might be able to come to an agreement. Naruto thought it was an event for another day, so he didn't worry too much about it. But at last he was getting an opportunity to fight like a man. He gave himself Sanbai-level core energy, and made a self-promise to only open 3 of his 10 gates. Yes, a Chibaku Tensei, planetary disaster, would suit perfectly with that. After 8 years, he was eager for a chance to stretch his legs, but he couldn't help but wonder how suspicious everyone was of him. It all has to do with how he initially found the hiding area. Rewind. On his way to the Water Nation, Naruto hitched a boat after jogging through the Fire Country. He heard some tales while on the ferry about 2 people who had left Kiri and were now coming back to join the revolution. He discovered the 2 men, purportedly from Kiri, conversing near the small ship's railing. One was a large man whose coat was much too small for him, causing blue fabric to tear all over his body. There wasn't even enough blue hair on his head to reach his ears. Although the other man next to him was taller and thinner, he appeared to be related to the first. Each of them had the same blue hair, black jeans and an undershirt, and a light blue jacket that complemented their hair. On the tops of their foreheads, where they once wore hatayatesh every day, Naruto could see a faint tan line. He stood next to them on the railing and exclaimed, "Hello?" as joyfully as he could. The burly one on the right asked, "What do you want?" Making it seem as innocent as possible, he said, "I've heard rumors around here that you 2 want to join the Kiri Rebellion." Instead, although he was a skilled performer, the demon always found the overly happy act difficult. "What's it to you?" the man asked. "Oh, Riku, stop that!" the other one ordered, grinning impatiently. He was clearly fed up with Riku's pranks, which may have been his brother's. "The man's just asking a question." "A question that I don't feel like swearing, Kiko." "Stop acting so depressed." Riku crossed his arms across his chest and gave Kiko a look. It was a common way to represent intransigence. Now, the 2 were facing each other in a never-ending stare-down. "Stop getting in my business!" For 2 minutes, Naruto watched the transaction with mild delight. It brought up memories of his sister's anger toward him for not being excited. He chose to open himself and appear a little happier after the Hyuga event. "I'm still here," lamented the civilian with brown hair, Naruto. "Why do you want to know about the resistance?" asked Kiko. I'm thinking of joining." Rika let out a grunt. "You're just a civilian, that's way over your head." His brother shot back. "Who said help had to come in the way of Shinobi Nizan?" They were brothers then. This clarifies a great deal. His brother let out a sigh, clearly distressed by something that had happened in the past that Naruto was unaware of. The purges may have cost him a friend. I'm going back to the room. You can deal with the civilian Otuto. With a characteristic smile from a past life, he concluded. Yeah, I'm just interested in providing any type of aid I can. It's cruel to hunt people with Kekkei Genkais because they don't understand or fear them. One of the core values of a shinobi was deceit, regardless of his current level of power. In addition, even though it would be less enjoyable, it would be far simpler to locate the base without using violence. The slender man nodded. That seems like sound reasoning. Something Yagura and my brother have in common. Naruto had a hopeful look in his eyes. So you'll help a civilian with finding the way there? I guess, but you'll have to answer a few questions. They don't want any spies to get in. Naruto gave the man a nod of comprehension and said goodbye as he went back to his room. The Jubi traveled in almost total quiet for the remainder of the journey, frustrated by how trusting the world had become. The two brothers, despite the reluctance of one of them, guided Naruto to the hiding on the fringes of the main island by a tiny settlement when they disembarked from the boat. Finish the flashback. Naruto figured it would be best to simply go to bed for a day or two and wait for Mate to see him again, since he had nothing better to do than make plans for the future and have flashbacks. As he wondered when he had begun to gaze at women in any of his pasts, he thought, she really is quite pretty. As he went to sleep for the night, he was unaware that he had a faint blush from his imagining. The following day, the henge blonde, who had a civilian appearance, was asleep when someone knocked on his door. Trying not to slump back into his face, he moaned deeply and pushed himself to stand. Even if he didn't have to sleep, he might still feel exhausted. He was envious of Nine Beast, who was imprisoned inside his sister. He had to get up and answer the door at 5 in the morning, but he didn't care about nothing. He opened the door and noticed that one of the shinobi was watching over him. To give the impression that he was a fierce foe, the man donned a boar mask and ANBU outfit. But Naruto was aware that his reserves were meager, possibly high Chunin level. His strong sword, which was bandaged on his back, was the most intriguing aspect about him. That is one of the 7 mythical swords, isn't it? If only the mother of Naruto could hear her son's voice, she would ask. Why the fuck did you wake me up at this hour? Will you spar with me, Uchiha-san? The Jubi almost snarled at being labeled a useless shinobi with a stick up his ass, but he quickly remembered his cover. He was speaking to a disguised man who stammered so much that he made Naruto think of Hinata. At 5 in the morning, he yelled softly. Indeed, shouting in a whisper is doable. Quite an accomplishment, if you ask Naruto Mom, who is well known for her quiet ranting. Please? I just got off my shift right now. I'd like to test my skill against a shinobi from another village. I don't think I'm strong enough to fight Yagura's men. What's your name? Shichojuro, he stammered in response. The late teen with a boyish or woman-like appearance was revealed when the boar ANBU-like guard removed his mask. His eyes were dark, his teeth were spiky, his eyebrows were blue, and his hair was short and disheveled. In the alternate timeline, wasn't he one of Mei's bodyguards? Here, Naruto's more vicious side was trying to show. Why on earth would I get up early to fight someone who clearly has an inferiority complex? He should kill the moron because he wanted to sleep, according to anything. Other than the Akatsuki, nothing could actually affect his future. I need to prove something to myself, he began shakily, but his confidence built until it was comparable to that of a regular civilian. He is still not quite as self-assured as he ought to be. Go fight one of your friends, seeing how you all like the morning so damn much. But they're occupied with training and missions. I'm not powerful enough to fight them. Since he got up, he had to go do something, and once he overcame his fatigue, which was really only an illusion anyway, he was much more motivated to accomplish something. Fine. Naruto didn't know why he simply agreed to this. I'm grateful, Ryo-san. I'll get my practice katana and get out of this A&B gear, said Chojuro. To the left, down the corridor, is a training room. Following the man's lead, Naruto entered a big, dark room with a cold stone floor and a roof constructed of a similar substance. Using the Sharingan, he could see that the space was roughly 100 meters by 30 and that it was occupied by a couple of training dummies. The blue-haired teenager came back with 2 practice tantos after about 5 minutes. Acquire the Uchiha left his mature Sharingan on because they believed he was a member of that clan, and he asked in a cheerful tone, seemingly losing some of his anxiety when the subject of Ken spirit art came up. Naruto quickly reached out and grasped the hilt of the unsheathed sword, and Chojuro lit a few lights so they could see each other. When he said, "A Ken spirit art spar," he was not overly pleased because he possessed a lot of power but was unable to use it because Ken spirit art was all stances and skill, which he lacked, and if he lost or didn't spar, it would be a huge embarrassment and a blow to his dignity. High. All Uchiha learn to spar with tantos, don't they? I must learn to keep Mei-sama safe. He slid his right foot back into a regular posture and hurled his sword from his left to his right. I may not be a master, though you can't count me out, he said nonchalantly, imitating his moves. Let's dance. When the Kiri rebel said that, he rushed forward with a barrage of attacks. He swiped to the right, not the left. Naruto parried just in time, causing the boy to turn and launch an attack at his side. His Sharingan whirled as he leaped back, allowing him to see Chojuro's next move before it was delivered. Naruto blocked the obvious attack with another awkward parry. As the spar went on, Chojuro's resolve grew stronger and more resolute, and the youngster in glasses assaults got more methodical and accurate. The following 3 minutes of the spar were made up of similar blocks, with the Hyde Ninja Village resident narrowly escaping several deadly hits. I can't beat him in Ken spirit art. This isn't even close to fair. Chojuro swung at him from the right side. Naruto tried to block, but before he realized it, his opponent kicked him in the chest. Skidding back a meter, Naruto pulled his tanto back in a defensive stance. He held out the tiger seal and said, "In reality, your opponent will not use only Ken spirit art. Katan, Gokaku no spirit art!" Naruto dropped the tanto, which clattered on the ground. Fire release, grand fireball method. His opponent just escaped the scorching heat as a massive fireball shot toward him. Chojuro had jumped face down on the ground when the flames subsided, and he was now standing. So. Will your nin spirit art be up against my sword? Katan Hibashiri. Fire release, running fire. A stream of fire covered the ground and rushed towards the Kiri rebel, forcing him to dodge. Suetun Baku Sui Shoha. Water release, exploding water colliding wave. He used a seal to materialize water out of the air and sent a huge wave that covered the entire room. Naruto said before creating another tiger seal. Chojuro gasped as the inevitable stream hit him in the chest, slamming him back into the wall and denting it, almost knocking him out. The Sword of Blonde groaned. I may have overdone it. He concluded that the incident didn't really matter to him because he wouldn't be in danger and his family wouldn't be affected by what happened, but he still needed entertainment for himself. Ryo-san. I don't have enough strength, do I? He dragged himself up and sat on his knees, staring the bijou with the brown hair, soaked by the spirit art. It is not shame to fall before me, he said indifferently. How do I get stronger? Who knows? The Ken spirit art combat was a rush, a unique challenge that he longed to accomplish more frequently. I'm going back to sleep. He sighed, rapidly growing bored once more. He passed the panting teenager, opened the hallway door, and made his way back to his room. He thought the swordsman wasn't too awful for a normal human. In fact, he was certain that he would have lost in only Ken's spirit art. The kid also had that enormous-ass sword. He strolled back to his bed, turned off his Sharingan, and fell asleep right away for another pleasant snooze. Perhaps he would wake up for lunch. His view was marred by blackness. The Jubi were startled awake by a loud cry. "Everyone get out of the base!" Over an intercom that was attached to every apartment block, Ao's voice yelled this. "I'm still trying to sleep, so why in the world do they need me?" Naruto was forced to stand up when the speaker concluded and a red light flashed around the room, saying, "We are under attack! Rise with your weapons and end the rebellion! I will provide you with instructions outside." Ao yelled. Maybe Kiri will be more fascinating than I anticipated. He threw on his clothing and marched to the exit with a line of ready shinobi. The man appeared to try to exact revenge for going too far with Chojuro, but it didn't seem to faze the omnipotent. Still posing as a Uchiha, Naruto activated his Sharingan and ran to the front lines as instructed by Ao, who was just outside the compound. They went past the medical tents, where a shinobi covered in blood or almost dead covered the mats on each of the white tents, while women dressed entirely in white with red plus caps came and went from the tents. He walked by mindlessly, trailing the man with the black hair ahead of him to the front lines. A few Mednines would run up with a stretcher and cart away one of the bodies on a white stretcher, but other than the timid newly woken shinobi, all of them had dust on their tattered clothes, and Naruto even saw one person whose shit was torn to the point where it looked like he was wearing a sash. The sight of battered and bloody shinobi standing on either side at a standstill was horrifying to the average person. The men had weary looks, tired looks gained from waking up early for a tiring 30-minute fight. A path ran from the resistance compound to Kiri, and the two forces stood on opposite sides of the devastated field, which had once been populated by trees. The Loyalists had over 3,000 men to show, while the resistance side had less than 500, and the Loyalists had a higher percentage of genin and no bloodlines. The battleground was a destroyed field with pools of water in the ruined landscape, which was the telltale sign of Suetan Nin spirit art. The commander of the other forces stood before them. His name was Kira, but his real name was Joku Izumi. In the previous timeline, when Yagura was unable to attend battles, the man was known for brutally killing the enemy until he was defeated a year before the rebels took over Kiri. It was said that no one survived any battle he won, but that was a foolish myth. Naruto now realized that the shinobi always had each other's backs, and that these battles were won through planning and teamwork. The troops were only a few rows deep, preferring widespread, and the shinobi were not huddled together, perhaps one person every 10 feet. "Hold on!" From his right, he heard someone say. "Ryo, is that you?" Another individual was making their way toward the Jubi by pushing through the forces. The voice was familiar to him. Kiko, as expected, a man with blue hair, a muted cyan jacket, and a black shirt underneath showed up. He was coated in blood, which clumped his hair together and adhered to his slightly tattered shirt. He rubbed his shoulder, which appeared to have been clipped by a weapon. "I thought you were a civilian," he said. "Well, I'm not. I'm a Uchiha," Naruto said carelessly, stirring up anticipation but knowing it was wrong. A part of him wondered where his passion for peace had gone, and where his desire to keep everyone safe had gone. "Awesome! We will definitely win this now," he attempted to cheer himself up with a foolish smirk, but Naruto could see that something was bothering him deep within his hazel eyes. "Your brother is where? Was it Rika?" The man looked down, and Kiko's eyes darkened. "He and a third of our men have already perished. Mei-sama managed to repel them before suffering serious injuries as well." Naruto was not a bastard. He couldn't add insult to injury, but he also didn't feel overly emotional, and he disregarded his instincts even though they were still strange. "Ao, wearing his regular gray turtleneck underneath his green haori, strolled all the way to the front and turned around to address the resistance when the ranks abruptly split apart and people moved away from the center of the resistance. Where in the hell is Mei? Naruto wondered. Everyone, we can't lose here, the commander said as the ninjas abruptly stopped their side chats and focused on him. We had already repelled half of their force, and now we have healed all the wounded, readied the fighters, and emerged victorious. We'll let them know that they can't mess with us. Even if it means retreating, we shall uphold Mei's principles. However, we won't give up without delivering our message. We're going to launch an offensive today, and we won't let up. They all applauded Ao's motivational speech, and they threw all kinds of weapons, from spears to swords, into the air with resolve. Naruto was bored, only mildly affected by the leader's conviction. It was obvious that Ao didn't give many speeches, none of which were at his father's or Gigi's caliber. While some formed the first-hand sign for their spirit art, everyone displayed their weaponry. Charge! As he ran across the field to confront the enemy, he yelled. Kiko, whom Naruto deemed good enough to watch his back, sprinted with him as a field of colors followed, each yelling their distinctive battle cry. A massive clang echoed across the land as all the shinobi clashed weapons at the same moment, and rock spears shot just over Naruto's head, impaling the person behind him in the shoulder. The opposing army shouted their own declarations before confronting the resistance shinobi with a much larger wave. One shinobi in the resistance fired forth a roar of fire, but it collided against a wall of water and scattered with a hiss. A big water bullet shot at Naruto, coating him in a light fog. He held out his hands, his eyes flashing purple, and his predator route effortlessly sucked in the spirit art, and he didn't even realize that he had saved Kiko, who stood behind him, staring at him in wonder. What kind of spirit art was that? As the mist became thicker around them, he inquired, and soon they could see nothing but one another. The former Jinchuriki said, My spirit art, returning to the Sharingan. I believe that spirit art does not absorb core energy, and that the Uchiha possess the Sharingan. I'll protect your back whatever, so it doesn't matter now. Thanks, Naruto said. This will be enjoyable, and I can play on an even playing field without my sight. The blue-haired man pulled a weapon with the rearward grip and said, Get ready. Before either of them could say anything, Naruto pulled his own weapon from his pouch and held it in front of his heart. Two of the blurs charged at them, one fighting with Naruto and the other with Kiko. Naruto deflected a katana blow from above, then used his free hand to quickly jab at the enemy's stomach, causing the Kirinin to leap back a few steps and avoid the blow. The third ninja, who was standing back, suddenly unleashed a jet of water. Naruto used his predictive abilities to put the weapon in his mouth and create the snake hand seal. The resistance Nin was engaged in a weapon-on-weapon battle with his opponent, and Naruto chose not to intervene. Doton Doriahiki, he muttered, spitting an earth-like wall of mud to block the attack. The wall buckled but did not break from the attack, saving both himself and Kiko. When the first opponent attacked him again with Ken Spirit Art, Naruto was a little taken aback. Must they always use Ken Spirit Art? He asked, raising a hand. From the corner of his vision, he watched Kiko's opponent disappearing back into the mist as his eyes flashed into concentric rings and the assailant was driven away by gravity. The three blurs moved in close proximity to one another. Zukaku, Katon! The three shinobi yelled from outside the fog. Fire release, intelligent hard work. A massive ball of fire blazed over the battlefield, too much to absorb without taking damage. He wanted to save Kiko, not merely duck. He needed a moment to refuel because the fireball was getting closer. In a split second, he was almost directly in the middle of the fire, Kiko's terrified expression. He held up a hand and thought, now. Shinra Tensei. A similarly big pulse of gravity radiated around the two resistance fighters, scattering the fireball and throwing the attackers back. Kiko grinned and turned to his pal. "Phew, that was close," he said, and Naruto flashed him a genuine smile, one of the first since leaving his family behind. Unbeknownst to them both, a weapon shot through the air, and as Naruto's eyes were not the Sharingan or his Jubi desperate art, he was unable to predict it and did not see it coming directly at Kiko's back. Blood splattered the floor with a thump, and Kiko's face changed to one of surprise, scarlet dripping from his mouth. He mumbled, "Ouch," as he fell, stirring up dust and landing on his face. Spluttering, "I couldn't save you." Naruto sat down beside the man he had become friends with throughout the journey to Kiri. "It's okay." In contrast to Nagato, Naruto did not have access to the outer route. Instead, his Rinnegan was obtained by combining two core energies, both of which possessed part of the qualities required to awaken said desperate art. I said the same to Riku. He grinned once again, the gesture falling short of his eyes. "Why? Why do you make such much effort to save other people? Before I learned it didn't matter, I was just like you." "Obviously it's important. Ryu. I didn't fight today. Not for my brother or myself. I stood up for the families that haven't yet been destroyed. To hold on to them safe." By the conclusion, he was coughing, but his message was still clearly understood. Naruto recalled the war, Erosenen's sacrifice, and the Sandaime rescuing the village. Why did they do it? They did it for the children, not for themselves. I forgot all my beliefs. What happened to purging this world of hatred rather than merely toying with it? I understand. I used to be like that. Then what's preventing you? He coughed violently once more, spitting blood, his face turning pale, his sneer turning back into a sardonic one. From being like that once again, his eyes went glassy, and Naruto's heart stopped. Oh no! His ringed eyes went crimson again, 2 of the rings vanishing, and 9 tomos swirled into existence in each eye. I'm Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. Number 1 most unpredictable knucklehead ninja. I vowed to rid this world of hate, and to keep everyone safe, he yelled. Nibi Ichibi. Ki fuck, he yelled. 1 tail, 2 tails. Seal release. Releasing 2 of his 10 gates that were limiting his power. The opposing side was going to pay. The battlefield was cleansed by the sheer force of his core energy and killing purpose, which drove the mist away. Ao and Kira halted their Tai spirit art, with Ao using the Byakugan to assess the situation. Most of them used to pause their enemy to run back to their sides. Shinbo halted their fighting to observe the visible spike of black core energy. Naruto now had 2 ghostly black tails behind him, so invisible it would seem to be Gen spirit art. Ao gazed at the man using that core energy, thinking, isn't that the Uchiha? What is with his eyes and that dark core energy covering his body in some light cloak? It's almost like he's Yagura. More than 300 bodies littered the wet ground, most of them resistance shinobi, and the 3 Naruto had attacked were immobile due to their wounds. Since Naruto was positioned in the center of the battlefield, he required a means of distinguishing between the loyalists and the resistance, so he spared them all. There is no spirit art by Master Bunshin. Adjacent to him, 2 replications with master-level reserves sprung to life. Doton, Banri Dorihiki. As each clone formed the snake's seal, he declared. Earth release. Earth-style wall of 10,000 ri. A massive wall of earth appeared beneath the original, and the clones pushed the wall to cover the entire resistance. He stood 50 feet above the ground, able to see both sides of the standoff, and mumbled to himself. Now they're all safe. Letting his bunchins poof out of existence. The wounded were limping away to receive medical attention, while the commanders of each side were now back in ranks. She was intrigued by the development, but not one to discount a positive turn of events, and she watched from behind the resistance side, a woman dressed in blue with long, spiky red hair hung down her back. Injured individuals, please head back to the medical camp right away. Unheard by Ndu, who was consumed by anger and resolve, she gave an order. Willpower. The desire to rid the world of Yagura's filth and bring about harmony. He was adamant about his dream, even though it took a more harsh stance toward his pacifist principles. Fury. Rage over his friend's passing. Hatred for everyone who seeks out suffering and conflict. That he wanted to kill them all is ironic, isn't it? He yelled. You will regret that! As he faced the ant-like loyalists from the top of the wall. His mind was filled with images. When Hinata found out about Jiraiya's passing, he was lying on the ground with Kiko's blood dripping from his mouth. Observing Madara destroy the forces of the allied shinobi. His classmate Nagato. Pain. A great deal of suffering. I know what you mean, Nagato. Kira, the commander of their field, was grinning cockily. He chuckled to himself. One more punk to cut down. Die! Naruto exclaimed while displaying the tiger hand seal. Katon, Goka Mekyaku! Annihilation of great fire. Naruto let out a deep breath, and a raging flame shot down from his mouth. The entire army was in danger of being covered by the massive blanket that the flame blasted out into. Admiring the spirit art, the commander exclaimed, Suiton users! Now! A row leaped ahead and went through hand seals, controlling their astonishment and anxiety. They employed Suiton, Sujin Hiki, water release, water creation wall, to draw on puddles of spent water and spray from their mouths. The shinobi were about to crash into the fire when a wave of protecting water blasted in front of them. With a loud hiss sound, the wave crashed over Naruto's spirit art as it arched over the heads of the loyalists. After a brief struggle for control, steam covered the whole battlefield without crossing the wall. The 20-something Suiton experts had used up most of their core energy to contain the fierce flames, and both spirit art were barely cancelled out. Kira was perspiring. The early air was infused with the unbelievably hot steam. What was the origin of this adversary? Yagura-sama had been informed by all of his spies close to the opposition that they were helpless and exposed. He could have prevented them from treating Kiri lightly by roughing up the rubbish. One shouted, Commander-sama! What do we do? We need to be able to see. Who's a futon user? The man screamed, I got this! Thud dash! As a huge tail that resembled a tentacle sprang up out of the earth and struck him in the chest. There was only a shadow visible to all. The leader questioned, What the hell? Holy fu dash! One of the beasts grabbed another man. People who were close to him watched in horror as his body's inner energy was drained, rendering him motionless. Wind spirit art. No, said Kira. Futon Diatapa. Wind release. Great breakthrough. The majority of the steam was forced away by a powerful blast of wind that burst from one of the loyalists' hands. Most people were shocked by what they saw. Naruto sat with his hands clasped together on the top of the wall, his eyes glowering. Tails stabbed straight into the earth from him before slashing out from beneath the loyalists. Stupid people. Naruto smirked and said, They're just letting me take their core energy. Those whose core energy capacity were generously larger were drained, and there were several bloody screams. When some of them recognized what was happening to their friends, they pulled out weapons and began firing spirit art at the appendages. The Jubi's thoughts registered pain and he cursed. Damn it! He could clearly feel the pain whenever one of the loyalists cut them in half because they were an extension of himself. The underground assault ended as soon as it started, adding more than 400 victims to the death toll. Currently, 1,200 people, 800 from the assailants and 400 from the resistance, were strewn throughout the bloodied ground. Ao returned to their side and said, Mei-sama, should we help him? She considered dating such a young, powerful man, but ended up saying, "No, don't do anything, he seems to be doing fine." Naruto put his hands at his sides, leaned back against the wall, and got to his feet. He had recovered most of the core energy that he had expended, about a full tael's worth. He may employ that spirit skill or perhaps the signature method of the bijou. No, he would first enjoy himself. Taja Master Bun should know spirit art, he declared, forming a cross with his hands. Then, on top of the wall, hundreds more Uzumaki duplicates materialized once more. They all had the same red eyes, brown hair flowing behind them, and a weapon in their hands. They just possessed the Sharingan in place of the Jubi Dospirit art. He could do this without the mix or the Rinnegan. He raised his hand. The clones charged into the forest twice their side as soon as he got it to his side. The roar of spirit art was heard when the clang of shinobi combat resumed. An earth spike sliced through several adversaries in retaliation for a water dragon that killed a few clones. In order to protect himself, Kira had resorted to utilizing a sword that was augmented with core energy and 2 water clones. He was shielded from the clones by a handful of the stronger shinobi, who may have been former ANBU. Doton, Doryuden! Earth Release, Earth Dragon Bullet. One of Naruto's created a mud dragon and fired balls at the gang that was holding the leader. Spitting forth water, the former ANBU created lightning-fast hand seals. They all uttered the words, Suetun Daibakufu no Spirit Art, Water Release, Great Waterfall Method, and used a spiraling torrent of water to oppose the hail of human-sized mud bullets. The spirit art was used by the core energy-depleted clones, which were then destroyed by the water. "We need to leave and inform Yagura," Kira counseled, speaking to his guard. "Hi," they said as they followed him back through the conflict, where several helpless weaklings were suffocated by spirit art that had escaped. The commander saw a futon, Raisin Shuriken, whose name he did not know, explode in a massive sphere of white needles in the midst of the turmoil, right as they ran into the forest. The spirit art's Simban wind needles were so powerful that they instantly killed 40 people. His final thought before departing the battlefield was, "Holy shit. We must figure out how to stop this man." The party slipped away in the confusion of the conflict and vanished through the woodland. Naruto observed the devastation his clones had wrought. Served them well for destroying Haku's life and killing Kekkai Genkai's. I believe it's time to wrap things up. Utilizing core energy, he inserted his hands into the ram's seal and caused the clones to poof away. He determined that the wall should be lowered until he was just 15 feet above the ground. The parts of the earth wall that he was not on sank completely into the fissured dirt. He would have plenty of space for his Justu in that scenario. As a loyalist engaged in combat with a clone, he asked, "What's happening?" He was covered in dirt, scrapes, and blood, just like the man next to him. His companion replied, "I don't know." What the hell is that?" the first sputtered, pointing at the Uchiha. Red and blue core energy was gathered by Naruto as he raised his palms to the heavens. The tiny bubbles gathered into a dark spherical that continued to expand. Someone exclaimed, "Isn't that Yagura-sama's Justu?" The ball expanded to the size of a desk. 9 Bijou's ultimate and last spirit art piece, he said. "Watch the might of a god. Bijudama," and threw the ball in the middle of the surviving force, which was at least 800 strong. The fact that someone could launch such a massive core energy mass astounded both sides. Nobody was able to move in time. Everyone nearby was burned to ashes when the massive Bijudama exploded in a white flash. There were numerous mutilated bodies in the new hole when the light faded. The handful that made it out alive had already fled the total destruction. "Whoa!" whispered Chojuro, who had rejoined the action from the med tents. Standing to his right, Mei responded, "Yeah. Whoa. Maybe this rebellion won't be so hard after all." devastation pursued a man as he ran along a dirt path. He dimly remembered collecting his ANBU guards and departing at the last minute before a massive spirit art devastated the battlefield. The man, wearing a Kiri flak jacket and a torn black undershirt, was drenched with shimmering perspiration. The majority of his belongings, including his sword, were still intact. His blue hair was covered in water spirit art and splattered with muck. He was Kira, the commander of the forces of Kiri and Yagura. He subtly signaled the ANBU to remain behind and protect the path as he dashed down the wooded trail that led to the camp. He couldn't have that man following them. He wasn't even certain if he was human. Yagura had to know. He emerged from the forest into a clearing big enough for a makeshift camp. The Mizumaster had his own tent, and there were 9 tents in all for the ANBU and the elite shinobi. The regular soldiers, Jonin and lower, were positioned a little farther from the filthy dirt roadway, nearer the battlefield. The executioner, whom Zabuza detested for taking the name of his blade, located the biggest tent and immediately went inside. Although he wouldn't allow anyone to say that, Yagura was a short man. At roughly 4 feet 9, he had a childlike appearance rather than a leader's. His purple eyes and grayish hair made him look even more absurd. Fools were those who believed that made him weak. The Yandere Mizumaster possessed an arsenal of water spirit art, the Sanbai, and nearly complete control over his bijou. His mastery of the Suetun, Mizukagami no spirit art, water release, water mirror technique, which shot any strike back at the opponent to successfully block and counter most justu, made him feared. He reigned with an iron grip, suppressing most uprisings with brutal killings. Under the influence of a concealed Tobi, he removed the majority of the village's influence over his decisions and wiped out Kiri's bloodlines. Another reason Kiri was dubbed the Bloody Mist was because the academy students were occasionally made to fight to the death. Tobi was influenced by those who knew him before he became Mizumaster, who saw him as a brave and kind guy who would stop at nothing to save the village. He would now stop at nothing to gain authority and power. The masked Uchiha's Gen spirit art was mostly to blame, but the guy also had a perverted sense of retribution for what he had done. Yagura-sama! Kira bowed to his captain and saluted. The boyish man grinned, obviously amused. The fight is over already? Not in the way you think. At that, the pale master arched an eyebrow. Tell me what you mean. Yagura had never witnessed such fear in his commander's eyes. Someone came and he... What could have frightened the man so much? He grunted and grabbed some sake, gulping it down. Speak up, he said. He placed the drink back on a water country map and gestured for Kira to take a seat in one of the chairs that were available. He had core energy like yours, Yagura-sama. He killed over 2,000 of our men like it was child's play. In a fit of wrath, Yagura almost smashed his bottle of sake. Thus, the bloodline traders had acquired a Jinchuriki, a strong one at that, and that was the core energy he had previously sensed. Who the devil was this man, and how could they have already gained such a fervent supporter? Except for Nuda's father, who wasn't a Jinchuriki or involved, nobody was that strong. He said grimly, Tell me what happened. Do not leave out a single detail. As the man started to tell his story. When Yagura learned what had transpired, his eyes grew wide. It seemed that this man in civilian clothes had suddenly built a wall between the two sides. He then expended hundreds of people's core energy, fired spirit art after spirit art using clones, and concluded with a bijudama. The most peculiar aspect is that, although wearing a barely noticeable core energy cloak, the man created the biju's distinctive spirit painting by hand rather than in version 2. Yagura began to question what the man saw and didn't think it was conceivable. It must have been anarchy, after all. Nevertheless, Kira was his most trustworthy attendant. What will you do, Yagura-sama? I need to put a stop to this unusual Jinchuriki before the resistance gains support. Ready everyone for another attack in a week. The commander started to say, but that's not enough time for the troops to dash, but was cut off. The improvised room was on the verge of crumbling after Yagura hit him so hard that he crashed against the fragile tent wall. My word is final. We will end this disloyalty before it spreads. Kira wiped blood from his lips and grinned sadistically. Of course we will. Mei witnessed every action Ryo, her new recruit, took. Although she had been wary of him since he joined, the redhead never anticipated this. The young man, who she guessed was in his 20s, claimed to be a Uchiha despite having a civilian appearance. How could that not raise the leader's suspicions? When he displayed his Sharingan, she hesitantly abandoned the notion that he was a spy. There was no reason for Hyde Ninja Village to become involved, was there? She therefore concluded that he acted morally, but when he destroyed Chojuro in what was meant to be a Ken spirit arts spar, he shone very little of those qualities. After that, she ignored him and focused on the current battle. Mei witnessed the man enter the battle after she received a weapon lodged in her leg from one of the medical tents. However, he didn't start to totally control the loyalists until the midst of the battle. What was the source of this power? She pondered. Why is Ryo Uchiha here, and who is he? At the conclusion of the fight, people started to disperse as the man turned around. Many gave him a pat on the back or bowed as he passed, and some applauded. A contented smile appeared on Ryo's face, but it never made it to his eyes. She could tell he was hurting because she was positioned behind the remaining resistance shinobi. The cheerleaders gradually left the battlefield and poured back into the medical tents. Everyone but Chojuro, Mei, and her trusty Ao. The latter appeared to be experiencing a mixture of gratitude, astonishment, and rage. Masama, remarked the man with the brown hair. Not that anyone noticed his odd desperate art, which was the same shade of brown as his hair, but his eyes were returned to normal. Given that he was wearing a great pair of jeans and a feathery light black coat, his clothes appeared to be in excellent shape. Chojuro snarled, Ryu, as if he was hesitant to acknowledge that he had saved their asses. Mei demanded, I need the truth. Now! The Uchiha simply grinned more broadly, a look that she imagined was uncommon. She preferred self-assured men. Someone robust and youthful. Ryo laughed inwardly as he saw her blush a little. Ao scowled at him for responding, unaware that Ryo wasn't upset with her. I wouldn't think you'd ask me so soon. Couldn't you say thank you? He asked. He recognized the rationale and accepted it as valid. She crossed her arms eagerly and said, Not when you have lied several times, injured my assistant, and then allowed hundreds to perish before you made your spectacular entrance. POV Nerda. Nerda fixed his eyes to the floor. I'm sorry. He was an idiot. He believed that he was superior to everyone else because he had power, eternal power. He now understood that he had lost everything he stood for with the passing of a man who was exactly like his old self. All his memories of Team 7 were still there, even though he was not quite human. He recalled numerous instances in which he was certain that his loved ones would pass away. Even still, he was more than a demon or a human because he still possessed a sizable portion of his original human core energy. Perhaps he is the person Jiraiya mentioned all those years ago. Sorry? Ao said, sounding a little frantic. Sorry doesn't cut it. Mei even went so far as to say, I was wrong about you. When Chojuro told me what happened, I thought of kicking you out, sending you back to Hyde Ninja Village. You affirmed some of my faith here, but I still need to know one thing. She addressed him by saying, He saved many lives, his apology is meaningless in the face of that. What is it? The words, especially the fire spirit art that nearly destroyed them by itself, were not spoken, but both parties were aware of them. Just who are you? With the Byakugan, Ao noticed your core energy was demonic. When you did your little stunt, he saw an amount of core energy to rival 3 masters. I believe you are from Hyde Ninja Village. It makes some sense with your eyes and spirit art. Why are you lying about your identity? Naruto grinned once again and threatened to laugh a little. He scratched the back of his head out of habit. Who I am doesn't really matter. For all intents and purposes, I am Ryo Uchiha. You may think I'm not, but names hold no value as long as you do what's right. I figure that's what I came for, so you can let me get my revenge on Yagura, and I'll help you out. After all, I can't just let all this power go to waste when innocent people are dying. Regretfully, he still harbored a few haughty thoughts. Not everyone is able to shift so drastically so quickly. She accepted that response as she knew she couldn't push the obstinate child any farther. He might be useful either way because he has good intentions. Wait a second, someone said. Chojuro was not pleased and was also perplexed. You said you have morals? It looked to me like you swatted me against the wall without even honoring our Ken Spirit Art spar. The I've changed argument was too early, less than 5 hours to be precise, so he couldn't use it. He shyly said, I get grumpy when I'm tired. It was just a spar, and I was tired. It was true, for the most part. He was never a morning person. Ao whispered something to himself. No one could be certain, but it sounded like, I still don't trust you. Ryu, Mei said. Naruto gave her a curious glance. Had they put him on the spot because he had omitted something crucial? What bijou do you hold? All right. Oh no. He was unable to respond to that without causing trouble in one of the villages. Only the 9 devils and possibly the Nanabai could claim him as their Jinchuriki. The others were widely believed to be associated with one of the other villages as he sided with Hyde Ninja Village. When he said, 9 demon, long term, it wouldn't be good, but he couldn't plan that far in advance anyhow. He would simply accept events as they come. Mei arched a dubious eyebrow before deciding to take the response. Ao and Chojuro turned to exit, but the other 2 did not follow them. Let's go back. This morning was already eventful enough. Naruto yelled out. Wait, Chojuro! And the acerbic teenager gave him a questioning glance. He agreed and accompanied Ao to the medic tents and their base, saying, Can you give me some Ken Spirit Art lessons? I think I suck a little. Only Naruto and Mei were left to stand by the field strewn in craters. Ryukun, you seem like a good man, she said, grinning eerily at him. If Naruto's face hadn't widened in the same knowing grin, at least it would have been unsettling. He was aware that Naruto was a dense man, so he said, Mei-chan, you're not too bad either. However, he was no longer a total moron. Additionally, it was not too difficult to decipher Mei's lustful feelings. In any case, he always found her attractive. She put her hands on his back and said, You should go on a date with me. Tonight. I know a great place to eat in a Nibi village. How she simply adored a powerful young man, particularly one who was enigmatic. The words, sounds Gri dash, were not completed by him. She had already planted a tender kiss on his lips. Considering that this was essentially his first passionate kiss ever, Naruto dissolved into her arms. That spectacular failure of a graduation day does not include Naruto buddy. The 2 eventually withdrew. I'll see you tonight, Mei-chan! A flushed and ecstatic Naruto exclaimed. She hinted at potentially scandalous attire when she stated, Meet at my office. I'll be sure to wear something less constrictive. Yet the Jubi didn't notice. As she returned to their base, she waved and winked at him. Naruto was by himself, looking dreamily after the woman, his head resting in his hand. He simply wished he had thousands of years of dating experience, not just sitting there. Keep the ninja village hidden. Word of the change of events in Kiri would spread to Hyde Ninja Village a few days later. It was Naruto's father's responsibility, as the standing headmaster to do more than only look after his children and the business of Hyde Ninja Village. In order to keep the entire order in balance, he needed to be fully aware of every significant tribulation that occurred in the 5 great villages. The safety of his citizens might have been in jeopardy if Iwa and Kumo had engaged in combat, and it had escalated. One Jiraiya of the Sannin was the best person to inform him about other villages. A familiar core energy signature landed just outside the office while the blonde headmaster was busy scowling at documents about the Uchiha. A middle-aged man with red marks on his face and spiky white hair was indeed squatting on the windowsill when a window opened. "Jiraiya-sensei!" he joyfully cried. "Please tell me you came to save me from the paperwork." Jiraiya scowled at the massive pile of papers on the desk before giving the distressed master a menacing smirk. "Sadly not. But it is extremely important information I've heard from my spies in Kiri." "Kiri? They just began a civil war, right?" Jiraiya remarked. "That's the thing, Naruto Father Gaki. The war may already have a set outcome." Naruto Father was perplexed. The rebels were thought to be powerful and difficult for Yagura to defeat. They did have a lot of bloodlines, after all. "So Yagura is going to win?" Jiraiya persuaded the Yellow Flash that there was much more to this than just the resistance being a pain in Yagura's side by saying, "That's why I'm here. See, he's not." He consistently supported the misguided and unethically persecuted bloodline users. "What do you mean? Why are the rebels going to win?" With a perfectly straight expression, the Toad Sage remarked. "It appears they have a man claiming to be a Uchiha and a Jinchuriki of the 9 Demon." When Naruto's father saw his sensei's completely serious expression, he did a double take, even though he initially assumed it was an awkward joke. The dude was serious. "You're serious. Has he done something yet, or do you honestly believe that?" "That's the thing. The man annihilated 2,000 of Yagura's men with the power of the Sharingan and the aid of a bija. I had this from multiple trustworthy sources, one of which was an eyewitness. Trust me, this is no joke." Naruto's father was completely perplexed, but it didn't seem to stop him from considering the matter further. "What is his name? And why does he claim to be the 9 Demon Jinchuriki when only Natsumi-chan holds the fox?" It was nonsensical. Since none of the clan's members went missing, why would anyone claim to be a Uchiha or a Jinchuriki? However, the master was frightened by the Sharingan he possessed. He had to keep this information from the unstable clan. He also questioned how a man could be so strong despite being almost unknown and having a false persona. "I don't know why he claims what he does. It could possibly be an easy way to answer for his strength during a large fight of Yagura's men and the resistance. It was 1,000 versus 3,000, and this man was able to defeat all 3,000 single-handedly." "His name," Naruto's father recalled. "Oh yes, his name is Ryu Uchiha, a dumb choice if you asked me." "Dragon? Really? It sounds like one of the names I put in my first book. The Tales of an Utterly Gutsy Shinobi, for those who don't know. And it'll have to go in another book. I want him in our bingo book as an S-rank shinobi with a capture alive order. Draw out all your information on him and give it to Shikaku Nara, he'll puzzle it out and put it on paper." Naruto's father gestured for the Sannin to proceed, saying, "Sure thing, kid. Just one thing." Jiraiya took an orange-covered book from his ninja pouch and threw it into Naruto's father's hands, saying, "My new book will be coming out soon, so here's the first copy." He spluttered, "What? No! I don't read this garbage." The blonde was appalled and said, "I've seen that secret drawer in your room, Naruto father. Edit it for me, and I won't tell Naruto mom." "That's blackmail." He realized that he had yelled loudly enough to cause someone to enter and cover his mouth with a hand. "I mean, that's blackmail. Can't you do the headmaster a favor?" He was devastated. The man was correct. I am. You get this book a week early. And I'm not telling her to Mom. There was one lethal secret shared by every great hide ninja village shinobi. All of them, from Anko Mitarashi to the Sandame, adored Jiraiya's stories. It's for the storyline. The plot, the father of Naruto sobbed in denial. The Yoname sobbed as Jiraiya leaped out onto the roof. As he leaped over several roofs, he told himself, "It's time to put this guy in the bingo book," and took out his notes. She sighed and said, "I feel like I should know this guy." Naruto sneezed somewhere, as did his core energy clone.